Hello, everyone, and I am live. Welcome to my weekly right live Q&A number 11. So past number 10, so that's good. That means I've been consistent. I've been good with these. Yeah, my name is Danny Segura. Welcome to my weekly live Q&A. You might know me from my work at MMAJunkie.com, formerly MMAfighting.com, and in this week. There's a lot to talk about, and I'll be answering your questions about a wide range of topics, from global pandemics to cards coming up and all kinds of things. I mean, it's been a wild week in MMA, and I'm sure it's going to get even more wild. Just not even in MMA, just in the world. Period. It's been a crazy thing. As you know, there's been a few changes. I'm clean shaven right now. Decided to remove the beard. Strictly because of coronavirus, and I'm guessing I'll be talking a lot about that today. I was going to talk about it last week because it really hadn't impacted MMA, and this is mainly a live Q&A about mixed martial arts and combat sports. So although it was relevant, and obviously it had its issues, I think right now at this very point it's extremely relevant, as we've seen many events being affected by it, from the regional and smaller events to the biggest events like the UFC. So a lot to talk about here, and it's gonna be an interesting live Q&A today. Got my cafecito today, so I'm feeling good. Yes, Amy Wee, the babyface assassin is back. But yeah, and also I was at the Bellator. I just came back kind of on Sunday. I came back from UFC 248. So, if you want to discuss stuff about that, but I already did a recap about that on Sunday. And then on Monday, I was at the Bellator 2020 Spring and Summer Showcase, and I did like 6 or 7 interviews with, some of the biggest names in Bellator, and a few interesting things happened. I already noticed someone, addressing it on the chat a little bit. And what else? I also had a nice long sit down with AJ McKee on Tuesday. That still hasn't gone out, but it looked good. I'm excited for that to go out. I had about a 20-minute conversation with him at the New York City studios of USA Today. So we had a nice little setup, and I was kind of happy and excited to have that. So that was nice. Let me bring this up a little bit. All right, there we go. So yeah, lots to talk about. So let's get right into it. Usually how these things work, I tackle Twitter questions first, and then I hop over to the live chat and address the live questions. So if you didn't get a chance to throw your questions on Twitter, don't worry, you will get a chance to participate on this live Q&A on the live chat. So yeah, just stay patient. Let me get through the Twitter questions first, and then we'll talk everything, anything you want. So yeah. Let me give me 1 second as I pull this up, the Twitter questions. Also, if you want to get in the Twitter questions, which are it's usually what I headline the video with before I go live, and obviously what I address at the very beginning, follow me on Twitter and, sort of keep a close eye, because I have no set time for these, at least not yet, but I'll throw in a tweet usually 24 hours in advance or so. Maybe a little less, but usually letting people know, like, hey, I'm going live. If you got questions, throwing them now or wait till the live chat. I prefer the questions on Twitter, so I know what to talk about right off the bat. So it would be a huge help if you guys participate a little bit more in that. But it's been picking up, and I've been getting a lot of questions on Twitter. So thank you to everyone that submitted. All right, the Executioner 91, the homie, always faithful. Is Do Bronx the most underrated UFC lightweight? He has more submissions than Maya, and now this maniac is knocking out fools. Yeah, I favor this one because it's a great question, and I think he might be the most underrated. I mean, there's a few guys like him. The UFC lightweight division is so great. It has a lot of everything you want. So a lot of top contenders. It has a lot of veterans with big names. It has, and then it has a lot of these guys that are. The Bronx has been fighting in the UFC for a really long time, but he's still very young. How old is he? He might be like my age. He might be like 26, 27. Let me see. Charles Oliveira. Oh no, the dude's actually older. He's 30, but still, he's had how many professional fights? The dude has almost 30 professional fights under his record, and he's just 30 years old. Born in 1989. currently on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fight win streak. And yeah, as you mentioned, Executioner 91, yeah, he's been knocking out fools left and right. So yeah, he's looked great. He's always been one of these guys that has shown flashes of brilliance, and even from his debut, people are already talking about could he be the youngest UFC champion? Obviously, that didn't come to fruition, but people have always regarded him as someone who could potentially hold the belt. But he's had a few hiccups here and there. Hasn't been able to put everything together, but he's shown enough that people are still kind of kind of not maybe hoping, but with the idea that he could achieve more than he has in the UFC. Also, I really do think a lot of his issues and hiccups were his stubbornness to stick to 145. I mean, he's clearly a young guy still, like growing and growing into his frame, and not only that, but like he's a tall dude. He's a big dude. So 145 was just never right for him. But for whatever reason, he was always like, he would go up to lightweight, look amazing, pick up these amazing wins. And he'd be like, I'm coming back. I'm coming back. Dana, give me another chance. And then he would drop back down and have weight issues and this and that. But that's obviously non-existent now. He's stayed at lightweight, and it feels like those talks about going down to 145 are completely dead, which I'm very thankful for, because I'd like to see fighters fight, at their optimal weight class and that's obviously at lightweight here. So yeah, but yeah, he's one of the most underrated guys at lightweight. I think if he beats Kevin Lee, that's going to be a big wake up call for everyone. And all of a sudden, we're going to start including him in conversations of big matchups, right? The Dustin Poiriers, like all the top 5 guys, really. It's kind of like the Dan Hooker situation. Like, obviously, we've known Dan Hooker's legit and pretty good, but as soon as he beat Felder and as soon as he started, picking up these like top level wins, then all of a sudden, he's getting right. There's talks of him fighting Dustin Poirier and all this. It's in the works. So if the Bronx, Charles Oliveira, passes Kevin Lee, I think he's going to enter that stratosphere of the big fights. And he's no longer a rising contender, but a legit established contender. So great question. But yeah, I kind of feel like I should probably address the Corona stuff right off the bat, because all these questions are kind of, I got to put a little asterisk next to them. I mean, we obviously know that UFC Brasilia, for those that don't know, will be going on this Saturday, but it will be behind closed doors. So no fans will be allowed to go to the event. This was after last night, the governor of Brasilia, which is the capital of Brazil, pretty much put out a public order saying that there's not going to be any churches, any masses, right? Any religious events, any concerts, any sporting shows, any large gatherings, really. He put a ban on that. So the UFC had no option but to, well, they had several options, but I guess one of their options was to either cancel the event altogether or continue the card just with no fans. It seems, from what we've seen in other parts of the world, that seems to be the protocol. Like, okay, let's not cancel events, but the next best thing we can do is hold the events behind closed doors. Tons of matches have gone behind closed doors, especially in Italy and Serie A. And it seems the step after that is actually canceling everything altogether. It seems, in Italy, that's how it went down. It was, all right, only media and essential staff can be at these events. No fans, and then it's really awkward watching these high-level, really famous teams playing in empty stadiums. But now in Italy, they put a ban on all sports, all public events. So until, I believe, April, and then in April they're going to reassess and see what's up. But yeah, there's no games. Serie A completely came to a halt, and so many others, sports in Europe and now in the US. NBA is now at a complete halt. MLS is suspended. The Portuguese Soccer League is suspended. I mean, a lot of things as far as sports, it's going down. As far as MMA, there's the biggest response we've seen was the UFC Brasilia card, because obviously the government actually put a public order, so they had to say something. But as far as future events, there hasn't, not a whole lot has been talked about. So the UFC has sort of been silent on that, which is kind of weird. But I expect something will be said soon. But as far as other MMA events, we saw KSW 53 got canceled. One recently announced that they were going to hold all major events behind closed doors. And, it seems that's the trend moving forward. So for those that weren't taking this, seriously, it's time to reassess. I'm going to look for Corona questions right now so I can just continue this rather than answering some other stuff. But of course, there's going to be some MMA talk about, on here. So don't worry. if obviously that's what you guys tuned in for. Let's see. Can the UFC not just move events to countries or states in the US where there are little or no cases of coronavirus? How quickly do you think they can make changes like that? Caleb on Twitter asks. Yeah, great question. A lot of people have suggested that the UFC should move all of their events to the Apex. That's where the Contender Series has gone down. Obviously they control it. It is a venue they don't have to pay for. It is a venue that they don't have to rely on other people, because a venue can easily say, all right, we're closed. We're closing up shop. Sorry, coronavirus. But so again, it's controlled by the UFC. Is the connection all right? I see myself a little laggy. Yeah, all right. Let me know if it's bad, because I know on the last stream I had a little bit of issues as far as that goes. Let me turn off all my devices here off the Wi-Fi. Anyways, yeah, I mean, this is going to impact everything. Coronavirus is going to impact the way we live our lives for the next year or so. I mean, they're not going to find a vaccine, a cure for it in about a year. That's what they say. For those people that are going and saying, oh, well, you should worry about the flu instead. No, that is completely false. All the numbers that we've been getting are so much lower than what it actually is due to the incubation period. Like, you might not show symptoms at all of the coronavirus. It might take up to 14 days for stuff to show up. So whatever you see now, it's much worse. It's much worse. That's just the truth. And it turns out, from what experts are saying, is that the coronavirus is actually 10 times deadlier than the flu. So this is legit, guys. This is real. Again, we've also seen, some talks about, oh, it only affects, old people, right? That is true for the most part. It's really being, fatal to like older people. But we've also seen, people have complications, people in their 40s, and that's not even that old. I mean, I don't consider that old. Old would be like 80 and maybe above, right? Sort of retired age. But 40s, you're still healthy, right? You're still like a young, right in the middle of your life. So yeah, I mean, it's something to worry about for sure. As far as what the UFC is going to do, a lot of the things is going to depend on what these government bodies decide to do. Like, for example, in Brasilia, the governor was like, yeah, we're canceling public schools and private schools. I mean, you just have to follow that, right? There's nothing you can do about that. So yeah. So they're going to have to accommodate like they did in Brasilia. And again, as I said, the first step, it seems to be closed, have events go behind closed doors, right? But unlike other sports, like for example, Atletico Madrid, my team, who just beat Liverpool in a miraculous game, which I'm so thankful for. Thank you, God. They have their own private jet. They have their own private bus. They're a team. So it's a lot easier to contain, test all the players. They're healthy. All right, let's put them in our private jet and show up to the game where there's not going to be any fans and they're not going to have any exposure, and we'll continue playing. That the UFC doesn't work that way. It's not a team sport. All these fighters are flying individually in regular flights from all parts of the world and all parts of the country. So they could easily be way more exposed being in a plane, right, in a non-private plane, just a regular plane, and also just wherever they're at. So that's one of the issues that that the UFC and MMA events face, as opposed to, say, like soccer or other sporting events where it's a team and they're all together and it's far more controlled, right? MMA is far more spread out. So that's an issue. So that could be an option. They move everything to the Apex, but at the same time, fighters will have to fly out from other parts of the world to the Apex, right? To Vegas. So they're going to have to hop on planes where there's exposure. They're going to be on airports where there's exposure, potential, right? High risk of exposure. So that's something the UFC is going to have to consider. We know that in Ohio, and I actually wrote about a story about this on MMAJunkie.com. The governor said it hasn't been issued yet, but they're going to issue. It's imminent. They're going to issue a public order to, again, ban all public gatherings. That's the move, and that includes UFC Columbus, obviously a large gathering. So the UFC has two options: either they carry on the event behind closed doors like they're doing with Brasilia, or they cancel it, or they move it somewhere else. But again, as this picks up, cancellation is going to be more and more of an option, especially other big sporting leagues are going to publicly. I mean, it puts pressure on the UFC, right? If the NBA, the MLS, all these big sporting organizations are canceling, suspending the seasons. It's again, it's. I'm not saying it's not a great look, but it definitely says, not that it says something, but it's definitely something to look out for if the UFC is still continuing to have events. I feel like a lot of these, a lot of these big organizations look at what other sporting organizations are doing and they kind of follow that, right? So I don't know what's going to happen, but for now we have some fights this weekend with Bellator and UFC Brasilia, and then moving forward, I don't know what's going to happen. Like we just saw on Twitter, my former coworker and friend Sean Shadi just canceled his flight to UFC 249 here in Brooklyn. Again, it affects not only, we talk about sports, but it also affects, like, is media going to go? Is it, all this, like, are fans going to go? So is it even worth having? So like all these things you got to consider. But yeah, man, it's crazy. It's crazy. That's one of the reasons why I shaved, because with facial hair, I'm constantly like, grabbing my mustache or whatever. And it also, facial hair just carries a lot more germs than being clean shaven. I didn't want to take any risks. So, shaving at USA Today at the offices in New York, they told everybody not to go to the office, to work from home. So that's that. I mean, it's a big deal, man. But yeah, we'll see what the UFC response is, Caleb, as far as your questions. Again, the procedure from what I said, again, seems to be hold events with no fans. And then from there on, it escalates. Cancellation, and then it just keeps escalating. So we'll see if they move it to the Apex, but they still have to consider that fighters travel from different parts of the world. They still have to hop on public, right, planes, regular, ordinary flights, and be at airports. And, that doesn't seem to be a good idea right now. So we'll see how they go about it. Also, I'm wondering how many fighters are going to pull out due to fear of the coronavirus. Like, hey, man, I don't feel comfortable about this. A good point that Sean Sheehan on Twitter brought up was like, yo, fighters cut weight, and that brings down your immune system 100%. We've seen a lot of fighters get sick and get the flu 24 hours before their fight after their weight cut. I believe when Luke Rockhold fought, might have been Chris Weidman, he had a really bad flu, and it was because of the drastic weight cut. And we've seen fighters pull out of fights after getting sick due to the weight cut. And that's a concern, given the fact that the coronavirus is a big deal and seems to be is very contagious. Like, being that low in fat and that depleted of fluids and vitamins and minerals, because that's what you sweat out. It's risky. It's dangerous. I think if any MMA event is going to continue to hold fights, I think they should consider a little buffer, a few pounds allowance. A good example is in wrestling. When I used to wrestle in high school, after the Christmas break, after the winter break, they didn't want wrestlers and young athletes, right? We're all in high school, still teenagers, to be cutting a massive amount of weight and really, hurt their health, because, we got Thanksgiving, we got Christmas, right? We got the holidays, a lot of holidays at the end of the year. So a lot of people eat a lot of food. So then all of a sudden you got to cut even more weight. So they'll always give you a 2 or 3 pound, 1 or 2 a pound allowance. So say, I wrestled at 125 my senior year. So the first few tournaments of the year where always I could come in at 126, 127. I think if any MMA event is going to do that, I think they should consider doing that too. Therefore, fighters won't get as depleted and won't cut as much weight. So allow them to come in a couple pounds heavier, just as precautionary measure. Last thing you want is somebody getting coronavirus after a weight cut and then get it really, really sick and potentially have health complications just trying to make a weight. So I think that's something they should consider. But great point brought up by Sean Sheehan. All right, moving on to the Twitter questions here, the other Twitter questions. Let's see. Do you think more fighters, and this is Amy Wee on Twitter, I saw her on the chat, so shouts out. Do you think more fighters are going to fight outside of the octagon at UFC events, or actually learn from Ortega and other previous incidents? Yeah. This is that is a great question. So for those that that haven't tuned into this whole Ortega Korean Zombie beef thing, it was basically what happened was Korean Zombie went on an interview on Ariel's show on ESPN, and he was accompanied by a rapper. Or I believe it's K-pop. I'm not sure, but Jay Park, this guy, he's famous. And basically, he was his translator, and Korean Zombie ran his mouth on like any other interview we've seen, and he was basically talking smack about Brian Ortega. Said he was ducking him, this and that, right? And all Jay Park was doing was translating. I'm sure he's friends with Korean Zombie. I mean, they're both Korean, and I think they're friends. Yeah, but all he was doing was translating, and Ortega kind of took offense to that, and kind of called him out, and issued a warning. He's like, "Yo, if I see you in public, I'm gonna slap you." And Jay Park did rightfully so. Replied like, "Hey man, don't shoot the messenger / translator." Like, yeah, I'm just translating. Like, that's what he said, not me. He said in Korean. I'm just literally translating so the English audience can understand what he's saying, but it doesn't change what he's saying. So yeah, that was that. Then UFC 248 comes around. This was in Vegas, and yeah, Brian KZ goes to the bathroom. Ortega pulls up to Jay Park, slaps him. There's a video of it, and that's that. And obviously, it was not a good look for Ortega, because as Jay Park noted in an interview with Hawani, it was like, dude, I'm not a professional fighter. Like, what is he trying to prove he can kick my ass? Like obviously, dude, Ortega is one of the best featherweights in the world. Like, he would destroy Park at any moment. So, and again, he didn't do anything wrong. He was just translating. And then, but I also understand Ortega. And we know his background. He comes from the streets, so he operates by a different code. So I can understand that as well. But yeah, so anyways, Ortega then issued an apology. Same thing with his professor, Henry Gracie, right? And that's that. So anyways, as far as Ortega goes, obviously it was a bad look publicly for him, but beyond that, it didn't escalate to anything else. I think when fighters are really going to keep this in mind is once they get charged with assault or something like that. We've seen a lot of fights break out between fighters and all that, right backstage at 3-piece and a soda. But then as far as like, usually no public thing, no legal thing is pursued. Like, the cops aren't called or anything like that. I don't know if it's because like no big injury has happened from it, as well as maybe fighters, there's some sort of ego and public perception as far as like, oh, if I call police, like, I'm a fighter, I'm supposed to defend myself. Maybe they think it's a bad look with the public. I don't know, but the moment that happens, I think they're gonna realize like, oh shit, like this could ruin my career. So again, assault is assault. Keep fighting inside of the octagon. Get paid for it. Don't get into street fights. Street fights are not good. You never know what can happen. Recently, a few months ago, some Mexican actor, I think it was in Miami, got into a scuffle with someone on the street, knocked him out. The dude hit his head on the pavement, died. And now the dude is behind bars for the rest of his life for murder from a street fight. So you never know what can happen. Again, keep street fight clean. Keep fighting clean. Keep it in the octagon. Don't fight outside of the cage. But again, these guys are fighters. A lot of them come from backgrounds where this is very normal, and again, they operate under a different code. So I understand these things might happen, but I do hope that they learn from Ortega's experience and don't do these kinds of things, because again, it's assault. It ain't cool. So yeah, that's all I got to say about that. CeeLo Obsessed, do you think the UFC will continue fights that don't make any money from the gate, only on pay-per-view? Yeah, that's something they have to reassess. I don't know exactly how important gate will be to their revenue. We know like their ESPN deal's pretty, as far as pay-per-view goes, it's pretty nice for them. Like, they get a good amount just from hosting fights. So it could be profitable just to have fights, even if even if there's no gate, there's no public. Also, something to keep in mind, pay-per-view might even go up, because this doesn't only apply to fighters and the UFC, but people are going to be more indoors. Like, I'm working from home. As I said, everybody at the USA Today office was told to work from home. And I know a lot of my friends here in New York City that work in media are working from home. So just people are going to go out less. It's going to hurt the economy in some areas, but at the same time, if you're home and you got nothing to do and you see, on the internet some ad about some a good fight coming up, you're probably, since you're home and closer to the TV, you're probably more likely to order it on pay-per-view and watch it. So I assume we're going to be consuming a lot more media now that we're all going to be, or people are going to be more likely to stay indoors. So that's something to consider as well. Again, this is all very new, and I'm sure the UFC team is working to sort of analyze all these factors. Because at the end of the day, they're a business and they're out to make money like they should. But obviously they have to accommodate to the times. So it's going to be up to them whether they continue having these events, and the consequences it could lead to, the risk management, and we'll find out. We'll find out what's going to happen soon, I believe. Also, something crazy that's not being talked about in English media, because for the most part, as far as all this, I've been consuming like a lot of CNN in Espanol and Telemundo and just Spanish media in general, because that's just what I do. El Salvador in Central America, I believe that's the first country that's closed, like completely sealed. They're one of the very few countries that have zero reports of the coronavirus, and they want to avoid anything at all costs. So you know what they've done? They've closed all borders. Like you can't fly to El Salvador. It's completely closed. Unless you're a citizen or a diplomat, you can get into El Salvador. But other than that, yeah, you can't go there. Everything's canceled. And I know the US has like a similar thing. They issued a travel ban to Europe, except for the UK. But there's still some. Again, I believe it's U.S. citizens, U.S. Residents, and direct family members can still come, and obviously you can come from other countries as well. But yeah, El Salvador completely just shut out. Only to its citizen and diplomats, are they allowing them in? So this is pretty gnarly. That's a pretty crazy stance from a government, and that's just to show that this is a real thing, and it should be taken seriously. We'll see what the UFC's response is. Also, for example, a good question is, what happens if you have a fighter in Europe and there's a travel ban, and they fight here in the US, and they're not a US citizen or a US resident? They don't have to pull out unless they go to another country and try to get in through there. I don't know. But again, this will greatly affect everything, including the UFC. All right. 8 paths of wokeness. Holy snap. He put in like 4 or 5 questions. I'm going to answer a few. If Dustin finally stops ducking Hooker, who should the winner fight next? Winner of Lee Charles? I don't believe Dustin's ducking Dan Hooker. I believe that fight is in the works. What's the latest on that? I believe it was pretty much close to official, right? So yeah, there's no ducking there. And as far as who should the winner get, maybe. But I do believe, especially if Dustin wins, Dustin's going to be in a much higher position. So I don't know if he wants to take someone like Charles Oliveira. Again, high risk, low reward. Maybe Kevin Lee does make sense because Kevin Lee does have a bigger name. And if he beats Oliveira, he'd be coming off Oliveira and then Gregor Gillespie, 2 prospects, two guys that are coming up in the division that not many people want to fight. So that's definitely going to boost his fighter profile. So that could be an option, yeah. But I'm assuming that Dustin's going to aim for the Nate Diaz, the Conor McGregor's, all those bigger names if he wins. If Hooker wins, then maybe taking someone on like Lee would make sense, yeah. Or Charles Oliveira, right? 8 paths to wokeness. Again, will they move Khabib versus Tony to Apex Gym to keep the event alive? They have to, right? Again, I don't know. We'll see. But as I said, they can move events to places that have less outbreak or no outbreak of corona. They can do that. They can have it in their own venue, all this, but there's still the fact of travel, right? And that in itself, it's an issue, as I mentioned. So, yeah, man, I don't know what's going to happen, but stay tuned to MMAJunkie.com. Whatever happens, we'll report it as soon as we can. So yeah, that's that. Again, A Path to Wokeness. Should Felder fight loser of Lee versus Charles when 55 is so stacked? Will a logjam for a title? So stacked. Will a logjam for a title shot? For the title shot. Matchup winners and losers of upcoming fights. We'll see where Felder's at, but yeah, again, Felder, as he said, he looked great in that Hooker fight. There's a case to be made that he won it. Personally, I don't think he should retire. He hasn't taken like a crazy amount of damage and has been knocked out a bunch. Don't get me wrong, he's taken a fair amount of damage because just of his style. But I don't think he's been someone that fans are going, ooh, I don't know, I don't want to, kind of like a Diego Sanchez or a few other guys that are much older and have taken much more damage in their careers. So I'm fine with Felder continuing fighting, and I think he's still a top guy. And he can just put on a couple wins together, and there could be some big fights in the future. So I'd like to see him, stick around. But again, that's his call if he wants to continue fighting or not. But the loser or winner of Oliveira, Lee, could be an option, could be a good option for him. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Let me refresh. I'm going to do some mercy here because I know some people might have thrown in some questions last minute. And then I'll hop over to the live chat. David Petch, hopefully I'm saying that right. What's the latest news with this week's UFC Fight Night? Empty arena, that would be something new in combat sports. Keep up the live Q&A, like it a lot. Greets from Austria. Thank you. I love Austria. I heard it's beautiful. I've never been, but I want to go. Also, someone, I don't know if that was David, but somebody, when I was doing the MMA beat, somebody wanted me to rock a jersey from a team in Austria. So they sent me one with my name on it, and I rocked it on the last episode of the MMA beat. I have it here. It's very nice looking. I really like it. What is it? Let me see. Still have it here. Looks good. It's got my name somewhere here. Yeah, there you go. So shouts out to Austria, and thank you for submitting that question. And yeah, I'm gonna keep these up, man. I enjoy doing this, especially now that I'm not gonna be going out a whole lot more. Maybe expect a little bit more content. I don't know. But yeah, man. It's not gonna be a first. I mean, has there been? I mean, I believe. Yeah, it's going to be a first for the UFC having an event in an empty arena. I wonder how much that's going to influence, because often we talk about, fighting in Brazil, and the big factor there is, one, the travel, obviously, but on top of that is the Brazilian culture and the people. Like, once you're out there, it's scary, man. And on TV, it doesn't look that bad. Like, you hear the vai morrer, vai morrer. You hear all that, but like when you're there and you're walking out to that, like that must be very intimidating. A long time ago, I talked to Mike Rio, who fought Francisco Trinaldo in Brazil, and he's like, "Yeah, like vai morrer, like you're gonna die." Obviously, I'm most likely not gonna die. There hasn't been a death in the UFC. I'm not used to. I'm no stranger to fans yelling stuff at me, like whatever. It's not a big deal. But like he was telling me, like, dude, once you're there and like the crowd's on your face yelling you're gonna die and everyone's like literally rooting against you, it definitely shakes you up. And then you got to get in there and fight like a beast, like a Trinaldo. That's a tough thing to do, man. So now all of a sudden, Kevin Lee doesn't have to deal with that. He's gonna walk out there to a completely empty arena, and you're gonna be able to hear your coaches a lot more. It's definitely gonna affect the whole fight and the whole relationship to fighting without the fans. People forget, but fans play a big part in sports. Atletico Madrid is a perfect example. That's a hard team to beat at home. We might not be the best team in the world, although we beat the best team in the world. But yeah, you go to Wanda Metropolitano, or what it used to be Vicente Calderon, and like, dude, and you see Cholo, you see their coach. You see Atletico Madrid's coach turning around to the fans and going like this, just amping them up, and like it just gets so loud. And any little mistake that the other team makes, the fans start booing and cheering and just letting them know like, yo, you messed up, and that gets in your head. So again, fans play a big part in soccer, and I believe they play a big part in combat sports as well. So that's going to be interesting to watch UFC Brasilia completely silent. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting and fascinating thing to watch. All right, that's it for Twitter questions. Thank you so much to everyone that submitted them cues. I appreciate it. Obviously, it gets this thing going on a good start, so I don't have to, kind of wait around and filter things out. I know exactly what I'm going to talk about, and I address it right off the bat. So thank you so much to everyone that submitted. Also, the Seaside, shouts out to the Seaside because they've been giving me some love on Twitter. Predictions for the next fight in featherweight. I'm assuming, I don't even know what fight is that. What's the next fight at featherweight? Like the next big one. Someone on the chat, please give me some. Give me some. I don't know what the next big fight at featherweight is. But yeah, please be more specific, the Seaside. But I did want to sort of address your question because you always give me love, so I appreciate that. All right, so that does it for Twitter questions. I'm gonna move over to the live chat. So if you got questions, throw them in now, and I'm gonna tackle them. A question for the ages: what is the most ridiculous excuse a fighter made after losing? I don't know, and that's kind of a hard thing to weigh in. Me as media, as a reporter, because like you always got to give fighters the benefit of the doubt, and there's been times where you're like, that kind of sounds like an excuse, but then you later find out more information, and again, you're not super close to the situation, and then you're like, oh no, it was legit. So I got to tread lightly and be careful with what I say here, because but yeah, I just kind of don't want to answer that one because it's a hard thing to. I don't know. Again, I wasn't in the camp, stuff like that. But sometimes you do hear some crazy stuff. But for the most part, and this is something that I don't know how other media members feel about it, but I do think excuses are. I mean, you never want to hear them, but like things do happen. They're real. Like, I mean, in your everyday life, you encounter hardships and situations and stuff like that, and that affects the way you feel and the way you do things. And imagine, getting ready for a fight and actually fighting, which that game is about inches. Any preoccupation or anything you might have in your mind, not even physically, but anything that might be going in your life could throw you off your game. And I do think that. But that's part of being a fighter, and that's why champions, especially champions that are able to have a long reign, that's why I respect them so much, and I think I hold them much higher of somebody that's able to defend their belt consecutively for a long time than somebody that becomes champ, because things could be all right in your life for a 1 year period where you hold 2 belts, but to be a champion that defends your belt like 11 times, like Demetrius Johnson, that means you had to, whatever was going on in your life, because things do happen, you had to be on your A game every single time. And that's a hard thing to do, man. So I do think excuses are real, and I do think things happen. I mean, look at Joanna Jędrzejczyk. She was saying like, oh, I had to get the right people in my life. My weight cuts weren't right. I was having so many issues with personally, and that was really affecting me. And then you saw her roast performances, and then people were like, oh, those are just excuses, this and that. But then, again, she fought Valentina, but Valentina's amazing. But apart from that, she's looked amazing. Her weight cut against Michelle Waterson, she came in at 124 for her last 2 performances. For Zhang Weili, she came on weight and looked, didn't look shaky, looked strong, looked healthy. I do believe her when she says I didn't have the right people in my life and I wasn't doing things right. And then she goes on and has that kind of performance against Zhang Weili. One of the best fights I've ever seen in my life. The best fight in women's history, probably. Yeah, I believe you, Jędrzejczyk. I believe you, Joanna. All that was true. Yeah, for sure, because I clearly see it. I see two different fighters. So yeah, things happen, and you gotta keep that in mind. Christopher Graham, roughly what percentage of pay-per-view revenue is attributed by live gate rather than pay-per-view by slash TV deal? With this in mind, how likely is the UFC to hold UFC 249 in an empty arena rather than cancel it? I don't know, but whatever. That's a tough one. I don't know what's going to happen to UFC 249, but as they mentioned, Sean Shadi canceled his flight already to cover this event. It's still a big fight. I'm sure other media members and journalists still have their flights intact, and they might be thinking about it, but they haven't acted upon it. There's also New York is a big media hub, so even if no one flies in or very little people fly in, we're still going to have a big presence just because it's a huge fight, and you know New York is a huge hub for media. I mean, that's why any company, whether it's promoting a movie, a fight, whatever it is, if you want to promote something, you hit up LA and you hit up New York because that's where the biggest and the most media outlets are. So you can, you can get the word out there. So I'm not really worried about media coverage for that event, but I do think whatever you think was going to happen, it's going to be vastly different, whether it's holding it in an empty arena or whether it's canceling it altogether. Whatever is going to happen, something will change. New York is the second state with the most cases of coronavirus. We also have a high population density, which is not good. A school in the Bronx got closed because a kid tested positive. I have a few friends. A friend of mine, she goes to NYU, and this is her last semester, and all her classes are now online. They canceled all classes, in person. They're all using Zoom and all these other meetings. New York City's already, it's in a state of emergency. New York City's taking precautions. From here to April, this thing's gonna look a lot different. So who knows? I mean, again, New York State has the second state with the most cases. I'm sure that number is going to grow. It's inevitable. And who knows if fighters want to even fly out here, right? Like this, keeping in mind everything you have to go through, how many people you got to be around with. Again, high population density. So I don't know. I have no idea what's going to happen. But as far as your question, as far as like how much does live gate matter? I think it matters, but I think most of the revenue the UFC makes is through pay-per-view sponsorships and TV deal. So I definitely think they would consider holding the event behind closed doors. Also, like I said, people are just going to be bound to be indoors a lot more than they used to, meaning we're going to be consuming a lot of media and we're going to be glued to a screen a lot more than usual. You're just not going to be as outdoorsy. So that could boost up, pay-per-view buys. I don't know. But yeah, a lot up in the air. Alec Cartier, yo, Danny, yeah. So I guess that's a direct quote from me. I was interviewing James Gallagher, and I'm talking to him, and he's usually like when he talks to you, he's very focused. Fighters usually like look at you in the eye when you're talking to him in person, and look around and whatever, and just like a regular conversation. But when Gallagher talks to you, he's like dialed in, and then all of a sudden, I'm asking him something, and I kind of see like he's all of a sudden talking a little slower and his eyes start wandering a little more. And then he comes to a complete stop and I'm like, what the hell? And then he just rushes his opponent, called Eleanor, who's talking to these two girls. I don't know if they were PR. I don't know exactly if they're friends of Gallagher, but I know he was talking to them afterward. But he just like rushes him, and then security jumps in. They stop him, and dude, at that press conference it was bananas. There was so many like little fights and altercations between. Because think about it. From SBG, you had Pedro Carvalho, you had Peter Queally, and James Gallagher. And then the Pitbull brothers don't like SBG. And the Pitbull brothers had the two Pitbull brothers, their coach, Eric, but Eric was chill, and Leandro Higo. And, there's so many little beefs. Like I was interviewing. So anyway, so that happened. They escorted Carl Eleanor out of the room. And then they literally just brought back James Gallagher. And I'm like, so what happened there? And he was like, I just told him to get out. And I'm like, okay. And then I continued on the interview. But yeah, when he rushed, I was that was very instinctual. I was like, yo, what's happening? But yeah, I didn't yell World Star or anything. But if this was on the streets, I probably wouldn't have done that either. But yeah, that was kind of my first reaction. I'm like, yo, what's happening? But yeah, that was kind of funny. That was a first for me. But yeah, man, I was interviewing Douglas Lima, and like all of a sudden, like someone runs like right in front of the camera during the interview, and I'm in my mind, I'm like, seriously, come on, like I hate that. And then once I'm holding the mic to Lima, and then I look over his shoulder to see what's happening. I don't know exactly, but again, Gallagher, Queeley, and then the Pitbull brothers were like kind of having a little scuffle, and that happened like 2 or 3 times during the whole media day when we were doing interviews. It was a bizarre event, but that rivalry is real, and I'm enjoying it. There's some heat there, and it's fun, and there's so many like it moves across so many weight classes that it is fun. Like a good example is like I'm talking to Queeley, and I'm like, where kind of like where would a win put you over Patricio? Like Patricky, that's going to be a big fight for you, this and that. And he's like, look, I know that Scott Coker said that Michael Chandler versus Benson Henderson's the number for a title eliminator for the number one contender. But what happens after I break his brother's face? Because remember, Patricio is still lightweight champion. So he's like, what happens when I break Patricky's face and I mess him up? Who's he gonna want to fight? So and we know how tight the Pitbull brothers are. So he makes a good point. If he has a crazy win and it cuts a good promo, Patricio might be like, I want him next. So again, that's all interesting stuff right there. Bellator is going to have, it sucks with this whole coronavirus because they have a really good summer and spring planned out, and I'm excited for it. It's going to be a fun one. We'll see how coronavirus affects those plans. But as far as fights, they have amazing fights booked. And yeah, y'all should pay some more attention. Amy, we love the baby face, Danny, crying. Yeah, I look like a teenager. And that's something like, I like the clean shave look, especially around the summer. Usually like fall, winter, I rock the mustache or the beard. And then, spring, summer, I rock the clean look. But I do like looking a little older. I get IDs less when I go buy alcohol. And yeah. But man, with this coronavirus stuff, I can't take any chances. So yeah, I had to go clean shaved. Ben, damn boy, looking like a new man with the clean shave. Yeah, I look very different. Christopher Graham, what are your thoughts on New Zealand fighters? Dan Hooker, Kaikura France fighting in San Diego 1 week before UFC 251 in Australia. Yep, I mean, we've seen the UFC do those kinds of things often, They'll have fighters from specific parts of the world not fight, where they're supposed to. But, a lot has to deal with matchmaking, timing. Who knows if they also want to fight specifically on like a specific date as well. So, or they want a specific opponent. That opponent doesn't want to go to Australia. So it's not all the UFC's fault. Obviously they can do some stuff about it, but there's other factors in play. So don't trash the UFC for those kinds of things. It's not all on them. There's a lot of moving pieces behind, why a fighter is fighting at a specific card. It has to do with timing. It has to do with not only with their own timing, but their opponent's timing, their opponent's preference as well. If their opponent has a little bit more pool, has a little bit of a bigger name, they're like, nah, I ain't going to Australia. I'm staying in San Diego. So you never know. Also, what if the fighter they're fighting is a popular figure in that place as well? So yeah, there's a lot to keep in mind as far as those things. Should Sterling be a backup fighter for UFC 250 in case Jose Aldo misses weight? UFC 250 is going down in Sao Paulo, Brazil, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I mean, if I actually saw Sterling at UFC 2 in Vegas, yeah. I don't know how healthy he is because I know he had like a hand surgery. But if he's able to be healthy and if that fight's still going on, yeah, why not? I mean, you guys know how skeptical I was of Aldo making 135. I still think I'm more confident now he makes it after watching him make the first fight against Marlon Moraes, and not only make the first fight, but I'll also have a good performance inside the cage. Because if he would have looked terrible, I'm like, I don't know if that usually speaks volume about the weight cut, right? If you look really bad out there. But it seems that it was a good weight cut. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't easy, but it seems it was a good weight cut. And you saw Aldo also, to his credit, he was a lot more trimmed down. So it wasn't like he was just cutting water weight and depleting himself. He's a smaller man. He's a smaller man now. He's not as big as he used to be. So yeah, but it could be a good option. I also, who knows if Sterling wants to take a short notice fight as well, but it could be a good option for him. And I'm not too concerned of Aldo missing weight, but there's always a little something there, given the fact that he used to be a 45er. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But yeah, it wouldn't be a bad idea. Danny, California Athletic Commission just canceled all combat sports events for the remainder of the month, Marco Mundi tweeted. Yep. And trust me, today, tomorrow, over the weekend, like you're going to see governments, states taking a lot more precautions as far as this stuff, because it's real and it's here. It's here. And yeah, it's a pandemic, and it's crazy. It's wild. Like right after this, I'm gonna go to the supermarket and just buy a bunch of food, freeze it, and cans and stuff. And I'm gonna try to go out as little as possible, and that means cooking and going to going to restaurants a little less, and just staying indoors. Probably playing more video games, watching more Netflix. Season 2 of Narcos Mexico came out, so I'm like 1 or 2 episodes in, so there's some good stuff to catch up on. Who's your favorite interview? There's a lot of good guys out there that are good interviews. On Monday I spoke to Musasi. Musasi is always a fun time. He did this. He had this brilliant metaphor of and I want to be very clear about this. Rafael Lovato Jr. has not failed a drug test in Bellator, from what I'm aware of, and there's no reason to believe why he is on steroids. However, Musashi disagrees, and he just goes, "Look at him physically. He's 35 years old, and he looks like Hulk Hogan." That's what he said. His quote. Again, all those possible to you get really in good shape, and lift. Again, I'm not making any types of accusations, but his metaphor was, it's like if you go to the doctor and you got herpes on your nuts, and the doctor looks at it and he goes, "Yeah, that's herpes." Like it's an eye test. You don't need to do any. But of course, it doesn't directly apply. But yeah. So Musasi's a fun interview. That dude's always fun. He's always in a good mood too, and very nice guy. So Douglas Lima, always somebody very gracious with his time, very humble, very chill to interview. I enjoy talking to him. I enjoy talking a lot to Michael Chiesa. He's always very honest. He has an interesting outlook as far as his career. Like he's very pragmatic in the way he thinks. Like he has everything. Like a lot of fighters, you ask them about things, or you even give them stats about themselves, and they're just like, "No, I didn't know that. Dude. I don't really care, but thanks for bringing it up." Kies was aware of a lot of things, and that's why I think he would make a great analyst. And I'm happy to see him work at on the desk for these ESPN Plus broadcasts. Like I think he's great. He's a very smart dude. So I like talking to him. Dude, he even gave me time before I even worked for anybody. Like when I was just running this YouTube channel on my own, like I hit him up on Twitter, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm down to do a Skype interview." I'm like, really? Okay." But yeah, Kiesa is always a good dude. There's tons of fighters in general. They're very accessible, and they're really good interviews. So I'm happy to be in a sport where there's a lot of color, and it's fun, and people are very honest. If you look at these soccer or like these football interviews, like those guys are so PR trained that like it's always like the same answers, and like some crazy stuff might happen like during a game, and they're still very political about everything. So it must be hard for journalists in that field to sort of not get headlines, but really like get someone's genuine thoughts about something. They're very PR trained. As far as MMA, everyone's just usually just speaks their mind. But yeah, there's tons of good fighters that are good to interview. So I'm getting. Let me pull up the live chat here on this screen. So I think I'm getting towards the end of the live chat. I'm 54 minutes in. So again, if you got more questions, ask them now. I'm going to be a little more direct and quicker to answering questions. But yeah, we're coming to an end here. Um, Also, kind of off topic, but have you ever grappled with a female and thoughts on yourself like, hey, this is kind of hot. Just all right, I'm not gonna finish the rest of the question. But yes, I've grappled with many females, and no, I never think of hey, this is kind of hot. Um, I don't know. They're trying to break my shit and knock me out unconscious. I mean, choke me out unconscious. So that's not something you think of. Um, no, no, that'd be weird if you go with a mentality like that. But no. Usually, jujitsu, you'll mostly grapple dudes just because it's mostly a male sport. But believe it or not, there's a lot of ladies that train and they're very good. Or some like I used to have these battles with this girl in back in South Florida, Andrea. She like competes in like IBJJF tournaments. She's like really good, and like I was always we were always like I feel like I would get the better of her just because I was stronger. But then she got into like this like strength and conditioning program, and then she was kicking my ass. Like, yeah, you don't think of that kind of stuff. Once you're grappling, that's all you're thinking. Who should the winner of Lee Ortega face next? I already talked about that. But again, I think that's a fight where right now they're about the same level. Lee is obviously a bigger name, but his loss is kind of dropped him a little bit, but he's picking back up, and Oliveira's coming up, and he's never had that name, but he has more wins. So they're in a good spot just outside of the top 10 or around the top 10. But the winner here should enter the top five conversation and take on a big name next. Lightweight is very interesting right now. It's been for a while. Should Ortega and Zombie get rebooked? Yeah, 100%. Especially now after the whole J Park situation. There's some bad blood there. There's some real beef. They were supposed to fight anyways. If both guys are healthy and if coronavirus doesn't mess with any cards and stuff like that, and we're still able to have fights moving forward, yeah, it should get rebooked. That's a fight that completely makes sense. I'd like to see Ortega because he's been out for a while, right? Last time he fought was Max Holloway. It seems to be a long time ago, and he's had injuries. I would love to see him take a tune-up fight. Plus, he's so young and still very promising that, look, you got time to get back to the title. Let's not rush things. Build back your record. Get your confidence back. Get your mojo, your momentum going. So I'd like to see that. But look, Ortega seems to be gunning for the top guys. That fight is very sexy, very appealing. F it, why not? Izzy versus Costa in Australia next. Yep, that's the move. Is there anything left for Joel at middleweight? Should he move to light heavyweight? I wouldn't, I think he would have success at light heavyweight, but look, he made championship weight for his last fight. I do think his weight issues are a little bit overblown. Um, let's remember, I believe he missed weight twice for his last like 3 or 4 fights. Let me pull up his record. He is older, but like I mean, he's been older for a few years, right? He's 42, so it's not like one of these guys where he's like 24, 25. He still has a sort of not teenage frame, but not that like man frame. And then all of a sudden, you start getting into 27, 28, and really build a lot more on your body. Then you go, all right, maybe you should consider a switch weight class. No, Romero has been that frame for a long time and continues to have that frame. So he missed weight for his bout against Robert Whitaker. So he's missed weight twice in his last four. He's missed weight only twice since he's been in the UFC and Strikeforce since 2011. He's only missed weight twice in his career. One was against Robert Whitaker, which completely missed weight as far as I mean, I have nothing to say about that. And then the other one was against Luke Rockhold. But if you remember, for the Luke Rockhold fight, he was supposed to fight David Branch 2 weeks after at middleweight, right? So he was scheduled to fight 2 weeks later and for a non-championship fight. Keep that in mind. Robert Whitaker pulls out because he was supposed to fight Luke Rockhold. So what do? They bring in Joel Romero. So all of a sudden, Joel Romero has to cut more weight because he has to make championship weight, and he has to fight 2 weeks early. earlier. So he took that fight on short notice. That 100% affects your weight cut because you have it planned out as to where you're going to peak and all that. So I don't really blame him for missing weight for the Luke Rockhold fight. Again, the Robert Whittaker was all fair and square, but if you miss weight once in your whole UFC career, that's not that big of a deal. I do think Joel's weight problems are a little bit overblown. He made championship weight for his last fight against Adesanya. He made weight for the bout before that against Paulo Costa. Again, he always comes in last. I'm not saying making weight is easy, but he's not like a John Lineker or even, I'll throw even out there the case of Ray Borg, who are just constantly, multiple times missing weight. He has issues making the weight, but they're not extreme. So I'd like to see him stick to middleweight. I still think he's a beast. I still think he offers an interesting and unique style. I think he's evolving. Believe it or not, say whatever you want about that performance against Israel Adesanya. Yes, it was boring. But right there, we saw a fighter that's usually defensively not so sound be very defensively minded. He usually has cardio issues, or that's what people say. He went 5 rounds and still looked amazing. Granted, there wasn't much action, but again, the pacing and the management of his energy, people don't realize. But he's only 18 fights into his career. He's only been fighting. Well, he's been fighting MMA now for 10 years. Although he's 42, I do believe he's still evolving, and I've seen improvement in his game, especially in the Paulo Costa. He was throwing jabs and stuff like that. I think he still has some good amount of gas left in his tank. He's still obviously a physical freak. Dude, 2 fights, 2 impressive wins. We'll all forget about this Adesanya fight, and if he's still champion, I can see him definitely getting another shot. So for those people that are being very dramatic, and that was it for Joel, what is he going to do? He should move up to light heavyweight. Middleweight's done. That was his last title shot. I don't think so. I don't think it's going to be easy to get back to the title, but there's definitely a path for him, for sure, especially if he continues fighting and putting on exciting and great wins. Remember, prior to the Adesanya fight, that dude was on a streak of amazing fights. So please don't label him as a boring fighter. He's far from that. Let's see. Most underrated fighter in the UFC. That's a tough question. Right now, this very second. Geoff Neal is one. There's a few out there that I feel like are really good and don't get the praise. That's a tough one, It's a tough one. I'd have to look at the roster and kind of. Should Abdul Razak Hassan face? Who should he face on his return? So yeah, he had like a little, what was it, like a sexual assault case going on. Like, I don't want to speak too much on it because I don't know all the details. I know we had an interview with him on the side, but it's been kind of hectic and busy. I haven't checked everything out, but he's cleared from that for sure. So he's good to go, and he's ready to fight. And he's been he knocked out Nico Price in his last fight. He's had like some good knockouts. I'd like to see him get like a good name in the division. Again, I don't have like a specific. I don't feel too strong about like a specific opponent he should face next, but it's definitely somebody to keep an eye on. He's a good fighter, very promising. Got that power. So, fun addition to a division, and he's all good now as far as all his legal stuff is going. So yeah, good for him. But yeah. Why do you think Gallagher acts like a copy of Conor? I mean, Conor didn't. I can understand why people think Gallagher is a copy of Conor, but at the same time, it's like Conor didn't invent being brash. Like other fighters have been doing that. So anybody that acts brash and overconfident, all this, then people are just like, they're acting like Conor. It just so happens to be that Gallagher is also Irish, so there's that whole accent and cultural thing behind it as well. And then they're teammates, so there's got to be some influence as well. So I don't think he's a copy of Conor, but I would say he's influenced by Conor, and I don't think that's necessarily like a thing to make fun of him, like, oh, like, whatever, because like tons of younger fighters that train with older fighters that are successful are influenced by them. I mean, in every single interview, you hear Kamaru Usman praise Rashad Evans all the time and talk about how great he's been for his career. Obviously, Rashad Evans, African American, Kamaru Usman actually African, right? He's from Nigeria. So, similar backgrounds, they're teammates, similar fighting styles, right? Wrestlers. Again, one older than the other. Rashad Evans, super successful. Now Kamaru Usman, very successful. So it's very normal for a training partner that's much younger and coming up, looking up to someone and kind of want to be like them, like who doesn't want to be a champion? Who doesn't want to be as successful as Conor McGregor? So I think that whole acts like Conor McGregor copy is a little bit overplayed, but there's definitely obviously similarities for sure. And look, it's working for him. We're talking about him right now. His videos do well. People, whether they want to hate on him or they want to praise him, they still watch. And yeah, and he's a good fighter. He's a skilled fighter. He's got good jiu-jitsu. What's your take on Edwards Woodley? Did you see BT Sports promo for Leon? Thought it was fantastic. I didn't, but BT Sports usually has very, very good promos, and I will check it out now that you mention it. Joshua Wright. And first of all, let's see if Woodley Edwards happen, because that's in London, and things are looking rough over there in Europe as far as the coronavirus goes. And that's a number one contender fight. Could be. If I'm trying to think if Masvidal does end up fighting Usman, the winner of Edwards Woodley could be next. Woodley, obviously former champion, has a big name, so a win would definitely put him right back up. And Edwards has an incredible win streak, capped off by a win over Tyron Woodley. I think it could be enough to put him over. Who knows? We'll see what other players are involved at 170, but that could very well be right there your number one contender fight for sure. Granted, Masvidal is the number one contender now. That's keeping in mind that he does fight Kamaru Usman in International Fight Week. When are you and Luke collabing again? You were cool together. Yeah, I was recently last week on was it like Friday or Thursday? I was on his radio show on SiriusXM, and we spoke about obviously UFC 248, which was the big topic then. I don't know. I have some plans about this YouTube channel, and some stuff I'm kind of working on right now, and it's gonna take some time. Like I said, it takes time and money, and I'm a busy guy, and I'm not like broke or anything, but again, it takes money, and so things might move a little slow, but they're moving, and I have plans to improve this experience and get some cool content up, and I would love to have him on and collab with him, because we were just talking about how Usman looks up to Evans and Gallagher up to Conor and stuff like that. I respect Luke a lot, and I've always been a fan of his work, even when I was just a fan, which is kind of crazy, because then we got to work together and become friends, and that's pretty cool. And I think he does amazing work, and I think he's killing it with his YouTube channel, and he's on the cutting edge and on the forefront as far as like in the MMA space of people providing content on YouTube. I think he does an amazing job. So yeah, it would be sick to collab with him and do something. I'll hit him up, and we'll see what happens in the future. But 100%, I'm open to that for sure. I'd love to do a little video to talk about something. I don't know. All right, well, I'm gonna do two quick ones and bounce out. MME Productions, what's your main takeaway from your Javier Mendez interview? So many, man, so many. If you haven't seen it, I encourage you check it out. What's the main takeaway? I guess it was just reaffirmation that how seriously like Khabib is taking Tony Ferguson as a challenger. Because at that time, again, that was a few weeks ago, there was so much hype behind Conor McGregor's win over Cerrone, and people were already talking about, yeah, Conor's next for Khabib, this and that, and it was sort of nice to see that like so many people kind of not giving respect to Ferguson as far as that end goes, but Khabib is, and his camp is, so that's kind of nice, because he was like, Mendez told me, he's like, I called Khabib, and I'm like, so what do you think about all this, Conor talking this and that? And he was like, listen, coach, right now we're fighting Khabib, and that's who we got to worry about. I respect him. He's the serious threat here. So please do not bring Conor up again. All we're talking about here is Ferguson, and Mendes was like, okay, all right, and that's that. So yes, I've always said, I think Ferguson has the best chance of beating Khabib, and I think Khabib knows what kind of challenges he presents and how serious of a threat he is. And I'm glad to see the champion giving the proper respect and attention to such a worthy challenger. So that was a big takeaway. But there's so many, because we discussed stuff about Islam. Also, something else that might be like a little story, but Mendes was so high on Umar Magomedov, who recently signed for the UFC and will be fighting at UFC 249 right here in Brooklyn if it doesn't get canceled. And he told me, he's like, that guy will be a UFC champion. Keep an eye on him. And when he says something like that, I know that that's his sort of his student, but he has so many students. He could have said that about so many. But when you single a guy out like that, and he's Khabib's cousin, and he's undefeated, and he's looked great and all that, keep an eye on that guy. I think, you know, could be champion. Yeah, I mean, it's not a crazy thing to think about. I mean, the Nurmagomedovs could very well, in the next decade, we could definitely see them develop a dynasty in MMA. You know, talk about Islam, talk about Umar, right, and more are coming. So that'd be interesting to see sort of a family take over, you know, the belts. We'll see what happens there. But yeah, all those guys are fucking dogs. They're meant to do this. They're meant for fighting. And something interesting I really thought of, and something I will ask whenever I get the chance to talk to Khabib again or anyone else. Khabib was telling Ferguson, like, where I'm from, this is not like America. Like he was saying, how many street fights have you been in? How many street fights have you been in? To Tony Ferguson. There's definitely something to be said about growing up in, and again, I don't know exactly what's it like to grow up in Dagestan, because I'm not from there, but I want to ask Khabib that. Like, what is it like to grow up there? Like, how often do you guys fight? How normal is it? What happens? What are the procedures to a fight? Because here, you get into a fight, and if it's bad, like, they'll call the cops. I wonder if that's the same thing over there. Maybe they just let it run. I don't know. But, like, he was making an emphasis about that. Like, I'm not from here. I'm from a different part of the world. Things are differently there, and I want to know how differently they are. So again, it's fascinating that so many high-level fighters are coming out of that part of the world. Yeah. All right, I'll answer one more and then dip out. You do a great job. Thank you for your time. Thank you for tuning in. Again, these things are only possible because of you guys. I feel like a lot of people are sleeping on Alex Hernandez. How do you rate his chances against Islam? It's a tough fight for him, but look, he beat Trinaldo, who I hold Trinaldo very highly. I have a lot of respect for him. I think he's a dark horse in that division, especially when he was a little younger and he was in a nice streak. So beating him was big. And he's so young that, like, whatever you're seeing now, it's like a lower version of what you're going to see in the future. Like, that guy's just evolving. And what you see now is still pretty damn good. So imagine what we're going to see in a few years. Again, I don't know if he's going to beat Islam. I think Islam is a very good fighter, and I think I'd probably favor him to win. But even if Hernandez loses, like, you know, the road is long for him. Like, he's in this for the long run. He's going to stick around for a while, and he's going to do great things in the sport. He's so good. He could be Islam. Who knows? I mean, he's improved a lot. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see. It's a good fight. Very good fight. All right. Yeah. I'm gonna dip out. So thank you so much for tuning in. Again, per usual, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. I've been posting a lot of stuff on Instagram as far as I guess my professional life. Usually I just kind of mostly just posted personal stuff, but now I've been a little more proactive as far as like showing you guys some of the work that I do and some of the stuff that I do. So I love Instagram as a platform. So follow me there, follow me on Twitter. Subscribe to this YouTube channel, give this video a thumbs up, turn on notifications for future live events, and most importantly, this is something I want to address. And again, it's kind of crazy. Just a week ago in Vegas, it didn't seem like a big deal. I was interviewing Joel Romero in Spanish, and my last question was, any message you want to send to your Latin American fans that are watching this? And he could have hyped up his pay-per-view. He could have been like, buy the pay-per-view. It's going to be a good one. I'm going to win the belt. Thank you so much for your support. He could have done so many things that are good for his career. Not that my interview is, some crazy thing that's going to, boost up pay-per-view sales or whatever. But it was one of the very few Spanish interviews out there. But he did none of that. He warned everybody about coronavirus. And you can go back and look at the video. He's like, people, take this thing seriously. Be very careful with what you do. Wash your hands. Avoid public and large gatherings. Give this importance. Do not let it, take advantage of you. Like be what I'm saying, be ready for it. And that's exactly the same thing that I will tell you guys right now. Like, we saw Dana White kind of brush it off at the press conference. I think he even told Aaron Bronstetter from TSN, like, I don't give a shit about coronavirus. Bro, this shit is real. This is real. And the only thing we can do, because it's happening, it's be prepared. So take precautions, buy supplies, avoid public gatherings and big gatherings. Don't travel unless you have to. Wash your hands constantly and just be very mindful and listen to your body and be very careful about being hydrated, having the right vitamins and sort of minerals in your body, and just listen to your body, because this is very serious and it could affect anyone. It could affect anyone. So yeah, that's all I got to say. So I love you all. Stay safe out there. Thank you for tuning in. And I guess we'll have a lot of news coming up as far as how this whole thing's going to play out and influence MMA and the UFC. So yeah, that's all I got to say about that. Thank you guys. And peace out. That was